For more than 3,000 years, the Sea Peoples have been one of history's most haunting mysteries. They appeared suddenly, shook the ancient world to its foundations, and then vanished. No empire could stop them, not the mighty kingdoms of the eastern Mediterranean, not the great cities of the late Bronze Age, not even Egypt at the height of its power. They were feared warriors arriving from the sea in strange ships, attacking coastal cities and powerful civilizations alike. Ancient inscriptions describe them as unstoppable. Entire kingdoms collapsed during the chaos they helped unleash. But what makes the mystery even more chilling is this. After about 200 years of appearing in the historical record, the Sea Peoples simply disappeared. No more invasions, no more references in ancient texts, no clear trace of where they went. For centuries, historians debated their fate. Did they die out? Did they migrate somewhere unknown? Or did they blend into the very civilizations they once attacked? Now, in a surprising twist, modern science may finally have uncovered the answer. And the key to this mystery lies in something no ancient king or warrior could have imagined. DNA. The story begins in the final centuries of the Bronze Age, around 1200 BCE. This was a time when powerful civilizations dominated the Mediterranean world. Egypt ruled the south. The Hittite Empire controlled vast territories in Anatolia. Mycenaean kingdoms thrived in Greece. Trade routes connected distant cultures, and cities flourished across the region. But then something catastrophic happened. Within a few decades, many of these great civilizations collapsed. Cities burned, kingdoms vanished, trade networks disintegrated. Historians call this event the Late Bronze Age Collapse, one of the most dramatic turning points in ancient history. And at the center of the chaos were mysterious invaders known only through ancient Egyptian records, the Sea Peoples. Pharaohs described them as confederations of warriors arriving from across the sea with their families, possessions, and warships. They attacked coastal cities across the Mediterranean, destroying kingdoms and reshaping the map of the ancient world. The Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses III famously fought them in a massive battle around 1177 BCE. Ancient carvings show ships colliding, archers firing from decks, and desperate fighting along the shoreline. According to Egyptian inscriptions, Ramesses III defeated them, but the victory came at a price. Egypt itself was weakened, and the world around it was collapsing. The Sea Peoples had changed everything. But here's where the mystery deepens. After around 2 centuries of appearing in records and archaeological sites, they disappeared. No new invasions, no mention in later inscriptions, no clear homeland discovered. It was as if an entire group of people simply dissolved into history. For generations, historians tried to solve this puzzle. Some believed the Sea Peoples came from the Aegean region. Others argued they were refugees fleeing disasters elsewhere. Some even suggested they were pirates or displaced warriors roaming the Mediterranean after their own civilizations collapsed. But without direct evidence, these ideas remained speculation. Then, in recent years, a powerful new tool began rewriting ancient history: genetic science. Archaeologists had long focused on pottery, weapons, architecture, and inscriptions to understand ancient societies. But now researchers were able to extract ancient DNA from human remains thousands of years old. Tiny fragments preserved in bones and teeth could reveal genetic ancestry, migrations, and relationships between ancient populations. Suddenly, scientists could trace where people came from and where their descendants ended up. And so researchers began examining skeletal remains from coastal cities connected to the Sea Peoples. One of the most important locations was the ancient city of Ashkelon, located along the eastern Mediterranean coast in modern-day Israel. In ancient times, Ashkelon became one of the major cities associated with the Philistines, a group widely believed to be linked to the Sea Peoples. Archaeologists had long suspected this connection based on pottery styles, architecture, and cultural changes that appeared suddenly around the time of the Sea Peoples' invasions. But cultural artifacts can sometimes be misleading. DNA could provide a much clearer answer. When scientists analyzed the genetic material from skeletons buried in Ashkelon, they made a fascinating discovery. The earliest individuals buried there during the transition from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age carried genetic markers that were different from the local populations. These markers suggested ancestry connected to southern Europe, particularly regions around the Aegean. This matched long-standing theories that some sea peoples originated from areas connected to the Mycenaean world. For a moment, it seemed like the mystery had finally been solved. But then researchers noticed something even more surprising. The European-like DNA appeared suddenly in the population, and then faded away. Within just a few generations, the distinctive genetic signal almost completely disappeared. By around 200 years later, the DNA of the population looked nearly identical to the surrounding local populations of the Eastern Mediterranean. The genetic signature that once marked the newcomers had vanished. At first glance, it looked like the sea peoples had disappeared from the genetic record. But scientists realized something important. They hadn't disappeared. They had blended in. This discovery changed how historians understood one of history's most mysterious groups. Instead of remaining separate conquerors or forming long-lasting kingdoms, the sea peoples likely merged into the societies they settled among. They married into local populations. They adopted regional languages and customs. And within a few generations, their genetic identity was diluted through normal human mixing. In other words, the sea peoples didn't vanish through extinction. They vanished through assimilation. Their descendants continued living in the same regions, but over time their original genetic signal became harder to detect. It's a reminder of something fundamental about human history. Cultures can disappear quickly, but people rarely do. Historians and archaeologists were fascinated by the implications. For decades, many scholars imagined the sea peoples as powerful invaders who carved out new civilizations or disappeared in some dramatic collapse. But the DNA evidence suggests a quieter ending. And they arrived during a time of massive upheaval. They settled in new lands, and over time, they became part of the societies around them. Some researchers believe they may have helped shape the early cultures of the Iron Age Eastern Mediterranean. Their arrival could have influenced new pottery styles, architectural traditions, and military techniques. Even if their genetic identity faded, their cultural influence may have left lasting marks. Others argue that the sea peoples themselves may have been a mixture of different groups from the start: migrants, refugees, sailors, and displaced populations brought together by the chaos of the Bronze Age collapse. In that case, their disappearance becomes even less mysterious. They were never a single people. They were a wave of movement during one of history's greatest crises, and like waves, they eventually dissolved into the shore. Still, the story is far from completely solved. Many questions remain. Where exactly did all the sea peoples originate? Why did they begin moving across the Mediterranean in the first place? Some researchers point to climate change, which may have caused droughts and food shortages across large regions. Others suggest political collapse, warfare, and economic breakdown pushed populations into migration. There are also theories about earthquakes and natural disasters triggering widespread instability. The truth may be a combination of all these factors. The late Bronze Age world was incredibly interconnected. When one part of the system began to fail, the consequences spread across the entire region. Trade collapsed. Kingdoms fell. Populations moved. And the sea peoples were part of that transformation. Today, scientists continue searching for more ancient DNA samples across the Mediterranean. Each new discovery adds pieces to the puzzle. With enough data, researchers may one day trace the full migration patterns of the sea peoples, where they started, where they traveled, and how they spread. But perhaps the most powerful lesson from this research is not about war or conquest. It's about identity. History often treats ancient groups as fixed categories: Egyptians, Hittites, Greeks, Philistines. But human populations are constantly changing. People migrate. They intermarry. Cultures blend and evolve. Over centuries, the boundaries between groups fade. The sea peoples remind us that even the most mysterious invaders in history may not truly disappear, and they simply become part of the story of everyone else. So what happened to the sea peoples after 200 years? According to the latest scientific evidence, they didn't vanish into thin air. They didn't sail away to some hidden homeland. They stayed. They built lives in the lands they reached. They raised families, traded goods, and became neighbors with the very societies they once fought. And slowly, generation by generation, their identity dissolved into the fabric of the Mediterranean world. Their ships stopped appearing in the chronicles of kings. Their names faded from inscriptions. Their DNA blended with the people around them. but their legacy remains hidden in the genes of millions of people living around the Mediterranean today. A silent reminder that history is not just about empires rising and falling, it's about people. And sometimes the greatest mysteries are not solved by discovering where a civilization went, but by realizing it never truly left.